I'm Kirby Allison, founder of the Hanger Project. We're in the Royal Arcade here in London in front of George Cleverley, the famous London bespoke shoemaker. We're going to go inside and see what they have to show us. George.
Kirby.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
nice to see you.
Always, one of my greatest pleasures in London is always dropping by the shop, so I appreciate you welcoming me in today.
No, you're very welcome. Always welcome.
You know, you've been in the trade now for the better part of, what, 50 years or?
Yeah, not far off it. A few months now. Yeah.
How did it all start? I mean,
well, I was working in a very old established, which is probably more like this today, shoemaking company in Duke Street, St James's, called Polson Scone. That's where I started in the 60s. And I've moved a bit since there, only to one other company, and then started this business about 30 years ago after Mr. George Cleverley departed at the ripe old age of nearly 93.
Wow. You know, what was it like? I mean, back, in the 60s, how old were you when you joined?
16.
16.
Yeah, 17, 16, 17.
Which was quite normal back then.
Yeah.
To go into the trade.
Yes, to take an apprenticeship, they called it, of electrician, carpenter. They were more bricklayer, but they were probably more than shoemaker. The shoemaker was never a thing that was probably thought of that much, But I went into it because I think more in that day I was happy to have a job.
Yeah.
I think that was the view then. I think it's a bit different today.
Yeah.
People don't seem to think that way.
Mm-hmm. I guess over the last kind of 50 years, how have you seen the trade change?
Well, I think the trade has changed, but the actual fundamental part of the business, the shoemaking side of it, hasn't changed. Styles haven't really changed. There's a few that we've added to them that are probably maybe what you'd call a little bit more fashionable. And we certainly now today make more casual shoes than we ever used to do 30 years ago. It was basically shoes that were lace shoes, brogues, Oxford, semi-brogues, but the casual shoe area has come along enormously. I think that's saying that the world is totally different today. People are more casual and they want to wear that sort of shoes. In my day it was black Oxfords, like what you got on, black full brogues, black semi-brogues, and then country shoes, brown grain shoes with a rubber sole, and then for maybe racing suede shoes in a brogue or a chukka boot. But that was normally what was happening in that particular time.
Talk to me about bespoke shoes. So, what leads customers to bespoke, and how's that different than your standard kind of ready-to-wear shoe?
Well, I put it into three categories. One is that you've got the customer that needs to have his shoes made because the anodity in his feet tells him he can't do anything else. And then you've got the customer that wants to have shoes made because he doesn't want to buy what we've told him. He wants this shoe in that colour with that toe shape. That's his own individuality, and he thrives on that. That he's not going into a store and the store saying you've got to buy that. That's what it is. So there is a number of people that want their own, and then of course the fit side of it. The fit is massively important, and I could tell you about the fit and talk about the fit, but I expect the reality is you would never know until you actually have a pair made to see how comfortable and how fantastic having a pair of shoes made against a ready-made shoe.
Yeah, often people, tell me that, in a gentleman's kind of transition to bespoke, shoes are always the last kind of component. But then once they get there, they wish that they started with their shoes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, sense in what you just said there. I don't know. I asked a lot of people. A lot of people have sometimes, because the saying, you can always tell a man by his shoes. I hear different opinions. Some people spend a lot on their shoes, but they won't do it on their suit or their shirt. And then you'd say that some people do it on their suit and cheat on the shoes. But then you've got certainly a fair amount of customers that will do the whole lot. Because of my travelling to America, I do like to talk to people because that's what I'm about and that's what this business is about. And a number of my customers will either go to a various section of tailors in Savile Row to have their suits made. So I still think there's a belief that to do handmade is still very strong. And if you say that your opinion is that shoes may be the last, I won't deny that, but I think there's a lot in what I said that you can tell a man by his shoes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Cleverley, as I said when he was alive, he always used to say, if your feet's not right, your head's not right.
And you've been traveling uninterrupted for the better part of, I guess really for as long as the firm's been around.
Yes.
Longer if you take into account what you were doing before that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, I feel like one of the things that I find, most unique about Cleverley is that anyone that's been doing business with Cleverley has more than likely been doing business with you, uninterrupted for that long. So.
Yes. That's part of our business. It's in America and in London. It's a relationship, that you have your shoes made, come in and chat, and how are things. That's what it's like here, and it's like that in America in a very big way.
You guys travel to the United States, to Asia, and it's either you or your son George, Jr. on one of those trips. So anytime someone orders a pair of shoes, regardless of for how long they've been doing it, they're going to do it from you or from your son. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's family run. That's basically, if they don't see me, they see him. He's the future of this business, and he's been at it maybe for a good 10 years now, and he knows, and he's very alert, and his legs are younger than mine, so he can travel more than me, which travelling is very important to Clemens.
Yeah.
That we need to travel, and that's what makes it all happen.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about kind of the bespoke process. I mean, there's so much interest these days in the craft, but whenever you see a pair of bespoke shoes, you don't see anything really that went into them, because it's, they're already made up.
Yeah.
So, for someone that's not familiar with how bespoke shoes, just kind of give us kind of the overview of kind of the different steps. And
well, I mean, first of all, as we said about the measuring, that is measuring the foot very carefully. And then we make a last to the foot, which we think is the same. And with the first pair of shoes, we stop them without the soles on. So we invite the customer back in, whether he lives in London, whether he lives in New York, because we'll transport fittings to New York, LA, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore. So we'll either, if we don't get the customer back here, then we'll have the fitting on the other side. The fitting of a pair of shoes is a very personalised thing with the guy, say like me or my son, that you try them on and you do what you think is right from what your experience tell you. But that doesn't mean to say it is right for the customer. So you've got to listen to what the customer says. The customer, you may come to the conclusion that the customer would like to wear the shoes a bit easier, a bit closer, lots of different reasons that he might be in his mind, and he is the customer, so we got to listen to him to see how he wants to do it. So then after the first fitting, if that's the case, then we'll make the necessary, undo the shoes, put them back into the fitting, then get him back in again to talk him through it again, and hopefully he'll say, well, that's the way I want it. And that's what we're interested in most. Doesn't matter what we want.
Yeah.
Well, after the last, then you've got, which we cut in paper first of all, is the pattern of the shoe. That's the style that the customer wants to do. First of all, do you want it in black, sir? There's a few different weights of black, whether if he wants a heavy black calf because he's going to use it as a heavy town shoe, then we'll direct him into a slightly thicker weight. If it's a medium shoe that he doesn't want a lot of heaviness around his foot, then we'll subtract him there. If it's a slip-on shoe, then we would probably suggest that you use a light calf. So then, once we've got the leather, then we discuss the style. Now, you see round us there may be 100 different styles in some form or another, but we always say to the customer, you don't have to stay with this. You can delete or add on where you think. If you like basically the fundamental thing about the shoe, but there's some stitching or some broguing that you want to take off or add a little bit more on, that's your prerogative. That's your choice. So after we've gone carefully through the style, then a paper pattern is cut to that style. So last making, pattern cutting, and then you come to actually closing. That's where all these pieces that have been cut out are stitched together to form the top part of the shoe. So that's what we term as the closer. So then after the closer, then the last goes back into the shoe, and then it's the maker's done. When we say the maker, we mean not the hole maker, we mean the guy that puts the bottom of the shoe on. That's the sole, the insole, the welt, the soles, and the heels, which probably would take about 2 days, to do a pair of shoes. And then after that, the shoe is made. And then, they left on the last for a week, at least, to dry, because they are wetted when they're made, to form the leather around the block. So they left to dry for about a week, and then we abstract the last from the shoes. And then then they go to the tree maker, where we have the fitted trees made. And when the trees are made, then we have them back, and then they go to the hand polisher, who spends about a week on them, actually polishing them up to bring them up to a nice patina.
So how many people have how many hands has a pair of Bespoke
Well,
shoes
you've got the
passed through?
last maker, pattern card, closer, maker, finisher, tree maker. 6.
When did you meet George Cleverley?
Oh God, I don't know. That's a question. Probably back in the 70s, 80s, yeah. In the 80s, one or two of the guys that used to do some closing or some bottom making for Mr. Cleverley used to do a bit for us, because I was in another company then, and then of course I used to, Mr. Cleverley didn't open on Saturdays, but I did. So some of the guys that he done some work for Mr. Cleverley would drop it off to me, and I would pop it round to Cleverley in the week. And then he was round there in Cork Street, where he operated from. And I'm trying to think now, but I expect early 80s.
Yeah. And, he's got such a famous name.
Oh, yeah.
What was it about Mr. Cleverley that really set him apart?
Well, he was the don or the icon of shoemaking. George did know it, but I expect probably he was making shoes from when he was very young, because he worked with his dad and his brother, and then Anthony, his nephew, come along. See, there's 30 years difference between Anthony and George. But George, he just knew. But then years and years of experience taught him that, which I thought, wow, this guy does know.
And what were some of the things that, kind of the sayings that he kind of passed on to you? Whenever you think back about how he influenced kind of your career, what do you think of?
What I think the unique thing about George is that every customer was the same. He didn't worry about that. It didn't matter to him. Everyone had a head and 2 arms and 2 legs, and he was making them a pair of shoes. He was humble like that. That's going to make you a pair the same as this customer or that customer.
And how did, so the Cleverley toe, kind of a chiseled, suspiciously square, how did that come about?
Well, I don't know how it actually come about, because, that was done in the company where the Cleverleys ran, called Tusex, and they started it there. And then in Cleverley's time, if you didn't want that, he didn't, he said, well, he wouldn't make a round toe, he wouldn't make a pointed toe. They all had to be suspiciously square, as he called it. So that's what his signature was, and that's what he said, this is what I do.
And so that's where kind of the iconic, square Cleverley toe came
Yes.
from.
Yeah, I see people
that you guys still carry forward today.
Yeah, I think you still see people, when I look into shops, you see people trying to emulate it in some form or other. But, that's life. You can't take a patent out on a shape. But Cleverley, if you went to Cleverley, that's what you got. And also, he made you any lace shoe you'd want, and he'd make you elastic sided, which I think he was instrumental of inventing. I think he did invent it.
Yeah. And what's the story with the Churchill?
Yes.
What it's
Well, it was Winston Churchill. He was a Cleverley disciple, which is this shoe here. That was his. This is the shape, and this is the design. It's a unique brogue with sort of imitation lacing. That's where he started, because he thought it would slip on, but he thought to have this here, the elastic. It didn't do it as much as lacing, but at least it gives you some support inside the shoe. So you didn't rely on, say, this of the shoe being close on the foot to hold it on.
Yeah.
So he reluctantly made that sort of look, but he loved he made loads of elastic side, but he was reluctant to make
the loafers.
The loafers, But now the world is different.
Yeah.
And more people are more casual. More people do wear loafers. So we do more of them than we ever done.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah. The Baron Duretti, which, I think was, one of your most prolific customers, quite iconic. I mean, how did you prefer his shoes to fit?
Very close.
Very close.
Yeah. But as he said to me one time, he said, George, you must make no mistake, I'm not doing a lot of walking. He said, I'm here today. He always used to sit in this corner. And I'm here today. And when I leave here, he said, I only do 5 steps and the Claridge's car takes me back to Claridge's. So that's, so it's not really, I'm not really.
So he wasn't getting blisters.
No.
Yeah.
But that is one guy I think that probably you'll never, I don't know. I mean, Cleverley was with him before, but I asked Cleverley when he was 90 odd. And I said, George, tell me something, how many pairs do you think you made? He said, well, let's put it this way. I can't remember any time in my life that I wasn't making him shoes.
Yeah.
So we anticipate you might have had about 400 or 500 pairs.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said, George, I'm going to donate these to you. And what I'd like you to do is put them in the window because my shoes are very, very nice. And it will give you some customers. Which actually, we've done that. And he was 100% right.
Yeah. You've been in this business for the better part of almost 50 years, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And, GJ Cleverley has been going at it for the better part of 3 decades.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you see your role in terms of kind of protecting the craft and really carrying on this tradition of handmade bespoke shoes?
To try and excite as many youngsters into this business. And that's what we constantly pay an enormous amount of attention to try and entice people to come in and we teach them. We've got a lot of knowledge upstairs, and when we go up there, you'll see there's 3 youngsters there that have been with us now for some time, and that gives me a great deal of hope that it's going to carry on because they're, sort of late 20s or early 30s, and then we've got 1 or 2 that are it's pretty much like the cottage industry. We've got 1 or 2 makers, or more than 1 or 2, a number of makers that work at home for us that are working in the garden shed. So we've got 1 or 2 apprentices with them, and all you can do is keep going to the road and hope that they'll stay and they'll be part of your team. And we try all the time.